America, he had thought, this would be a nice place to have a temple. And then, 6 years later, having returned to India with 30 or 40 of his disciples, he had been offered the same land. He had been staying in Bombay at Akash Ganga, an upscale apartment building near the sea, which had been serving as our temple. It had been close to most of our supporters' offices and residences, and the devotees had been making life members one after another. They'd had only one telephone, all that was allowed for a private residence. And Gargamuni, Guru Kripa, Madhavisa, Mahamsa, and Tushta Krishna would sit in a circle on the floor with the phone in the middle and take turns making calls. When one of them put the phone down, another would pick it up, and then the next. That had gone on for hours every morning, just making appointments to meet people. And in the course of meeting people, Tushta Krishna had encouraged Mr. A.B. Nair, the former sheriff of Bombay and editor of the Free Press Journal, one of the city's 3 English dailies. And after speaking with him and visiting him in his office, he had brought him to Akash Ganga to meet Srila Prabhupada. And one of the first things Mr. Nair had said to Prabhupada at their initial meeting was, I have a nice piece of land in Juhu that you might be interested in. Yadavar had noticed that he'd been nervous, sweating, and practically shaking. Quote, you would think that Mr. Nair would have checked Prabhupada out. Yadavar later commented, checked out the person that he was offering the land to, but it seemed like he offered it immediately, right after he met him. Yadavar hadn't trusted Nair from the start, but Prabhupada, always gracious, had said, all right, and arranged to see the land. The next morning, after taking a walk on Juhu Beach, Prabhupada and a party of devotees had gone to see the property. Prabhupada had liked it very much. Look at all these coconut trees, he pointed out. There are a lot of coconuts, and we can sell them and drink from them. Quote, this is the most important land in Bombay, he had said. We are going to develop it, unquote. But his leaders, Madhudvisa, Shamsundar, and Tamal Krishna, hadn't agreed. To begin with, the land was far from the city, where most of our life members and friends had their homes and offices. The devotees had been thinking of somewhere near Malabar Hill, some nice place nearby. Quote, Juhu was beyond the suburb, Ramananda later said. It was a place where no one went. A fishing village, Gargamuni called it. That's what it was, a fishing village. In other places, the devotees had always rented or bought a house and converted it into a temple. They never bought land and built a temple from scratch. And the land was rough, overgrown by jungle and brush and full of junk, with old 2-story apartment buildings occupied by tenants in the back. Locals were distilling illicit liquor in the thickets. Even staying on the land, to speak of developing it, would be a challenge. The stench, Mother Devisa later recalled, and the mosquitoes, cockroaches that could knock you over, rats, snakes, mangy dogs picking through the garbage, sniffing around. I was dead against it. We're Westerners, Tamal Krishna had objected. We can't live like this. Don't you want to be purified? Prabhupada had questioned. No one had wanted to take responsibility for the project, Life members had resisted it as well. Most of them lived in central Bombay, and we would hold programs there. So when they'd heard that Prabhupada was considering buying land in Juhu, a delegation of them had gone to try to convince him not to go through with the purchase. We will never go there, they had told him. They were our only supporters and very influential, wealthy people, Brahman recalled. If we were going to build a temple, we would go to these people to help us. And right from the very beginning, they didn't want it to happen. Paragraph. But Prabhupada had been determined. Paragraph. On December 1, Mr. Nair had written Prabhupada in Delhi. Dear, respected Swamiji, I am writing this letter to you in connection with my estate called Nair Wadi at Juhu, Bombay 54. The price of land in Juhu in the said spot is about 175 rupees to 200 rupees per square yard. We are selling the land at a dead cheap price of 70 rupees per square yard. It will be thus seen that there is a wide margin which can be profitably utilized for a big purpose as yours. 10 days later, Prabhupada replied, I thank you very much. Offering your nice property to our society. I received one letter from Tushta Krishna Das Adhikari from Bombay, and he told me that you are so sympathetic with our movement that you will accept whatever money we have got just now, and the balance may be paid as we collect. Break. Prabhupada had gone to meet with Mr. Nair and his wife on December 21, accompanied by Madhavisa Shyamasundar and Tushta Krishna. Their home was near the beach at the Theosophical Colony, a private enclave with lush lawns, flower gardens, and exotic birds. The living room had been filled with chairs and leather sofas with newspapers strewn around. Not, Madhavisa thought, a Vedic kind of house. Mr. Nair, a short, stocky South Indian man in his 50s, with a darkish complexion, pock-marked face, and receding hairline, had greeted his guests with a lungi-like dhoti. He had seemed to Madhavisa kind of highbrow intellectual, and Madhavisa, like Yadavar, had distrusted him from the start. I get a weird feeling from him, he remembered. He was a very westernized Indian, a newspaper publisher. He had been to America various times and was aware of world politics. He was practically an atheist, but he knew Shastra and everything like that. Mr. Nair's wife had been of fair complexion and wore her hair short, unusual for an Indian woman. Prabhupada had offered the couple Maha flower garlands and prasad, and he and the other devotees had sat with the Nairs on their front porch facing the garden. Paragraph. Prabhupada had been forthright in his appreciation of the Juhu land, but had explained that he didn't have much money. Mr. Nair had acted friendly and solicitous, and it hadn't taken long before they had reached an oral agreement. Basically, Mr. Nair had agreed to everything Prabhupada proposed. They settled a total price of 14 lakhs rupees with a down payment of 2 lakhs, by which ISKCON would receive the conveyance. ISKCON would mortgage the property from Mr. Nair and pay the balance of 12 lakhs later in specified installments. Prabhupada had offered, and Mr. Nair accepted, a similar arrangement for the down payment. 50,000 rupees at signing and 50,000 later. at which time ISKCON could move on to the land. And when he'd been paid the remaining 1 lakh, Mr. Nair would hand over the deed, though since the property had actually been in Mrs. Nair's name, she would have to sign all the documents. She'd thought the price was too low and the terms too liberal, but she had been overruled by her husband. Paragraph. Nair is a shrewd businessman, Prabhupada had later told Mata Devisa, very intelligent, so you must be very careful when you deal with him. He is clever, and if you are not careful, he may take advantage of you. But Prabhupada had been determined to proceed with the land and the project, and the next day he had written to Yadavar and Palika, here in Bombay we have got good prospects to purchase a very large land in Juhu for a very cheap price, just in the middle of an important neighborhood. We shall build our camp there and begin constructing a temple immediately, and later on we shall develop a large hotel and school. In general, we shall make our headquarters in Bombay. 6 days later, he had written to me. At present, we are trying seriously for a large plot of land of several acres near Bombay to establish our India headquarters. Bombay is the richest city, the gateway to India, and in all respects, the most important city. So we must have something here. At Akash, paragraph. At Akash Ganga, Prabhupada also met with P.L. Sethi, a successful Bombay builder. Mr. Sethi had heard about some foreign devotees doing kirtan in the city, and he had seen a picture in the newspaper. So he had gone in search of them to the building where they were staying, and after meeting them and hearing their kirtan, he was convinced that ISKCON was a spiritual organization, the best. Madhu Dvisa, who was serving as temple president, informed Mr. Sethi that Prabhupada had just come from America and brought Mr. Sethi to meet him. What work do you do? Prabhupada asked. What business? I'm in the construction business, constructing buildings and selling them, Mr. Sethi replied. What time do you get up? Prabhupada asked. And what do you do first? Sethi said he was getting up at 7, having a cup of tea, and then washing up and going to work. And when do you pray to Krishna? Prabhupada asked. When do you chant his name? Not any time I am praying to Krishna, Sethi replied. I'm only waking at 7, drinking tea, taking bath, tending my clothes, and going to work. Then, what is the difference between your life and animal life? Prabhupada questioned. You are just like an animal, just like a pig. The pig is also sleeping, the pig is also eating, the pig is also having children. There is no difference between your life and a pig's life. You must think of Krishna. This is the purpose of human life. But I have no satsanga, Mr. Sethi replied. No one can direct the life of this life to Krishna, Krishna Prema. If you want, Prabhupada said, I will send my devotees to your house, and you can do Naga Sankirtan with them, and you will feel the effect. So, Prabhupada sent the devotees, and Mr. Sethi went out with them, and they did Naga Sankirtan, street Sankirtan, chanting, selling back to Godheads, and attracting hundreds of people early every Sunday morning, from 5 to 7. For the next year, Mr. Sethi would feed them sumptuous prasad, and he soon became a life member. In Nairobi, Brahmananda wanted to attract Prabhupada to come by arranging a large bundle program like the ones in India, but Prabhupada did not want to be diverted from Juhu. So he set a condition. He would come only if Brahmananda arranged for him to meet Kenya's president, Jomo Kenyatta. Brahmananda tried, and he actually met Kenyatta's right-hand man, the Minister of State, but he was not prepared to offer the, quote, gift necessary to obtain a meeting with the president. Still, he proceeded with arrangements for the program in the hope that Prabhupada would come anyway. Finally, Prabhupada did decide to go to Kenya, but the program did not go well. I was never a very good organizer, Brahmananda later admitted. So the program I arranged was a total failure. Not many people came. We rented a football stadium because they didn't have pandals in Kenya there then. But the stadium was in the African area, so far from the Indians, who were our main supporters. And the stage we had constructed was half falling down. It was a disaster. But Prabhupada was happy because he had some other plan. Paragraph. One day, Prabhupada walked into Brahmananda's room in the modest house that had served as the Nairobi temple. Brahmananda was shocked. Why has he come to my room, he wondered. He never does that. Why didn't he call me to his room? Prabhupada sat down on the bed and started talking about Juhu. He explained that he had found a nice property with many palm trees, situated near a prominent beach where people went to walk and where the elites of Bombay came to spend weekends and holidays. He said that he had plans to build a huge white marble temple, a skyscraper hotel, restaurant, and an auditorium, and to create an international religious and cultural center for people from all over the world. Our Madhu Devisa could not do it. He said, so I want you to do it. Brahmananda agreed. My only qualification was that I would do whatever Prabhupada asked. He later recalled, I would always say yes. Even if I couldn't do it, I would say yes. So I said, oh yes. Srila Prabhupada. But Brahmananda was also inspired by Prabhupada's vision of the project. And he took him to see the Hilton Nairobi Hotel, a landmark in the center of the city, famed for its round tower. When Brahmananda and Chavana, who was assisting him, later returned to the hotel for a tour and advice on how to construct a round building, they learned that the plumbing and electrical installations had to be done differently, and that a round building was generally more costly and difficult to construct. Still, it was both distinctive and attractive, and Prabhupada accepted the concept for Juhu, with the promise of Brahmananda support. Prabhupada returned to Bombay for a week and then proceeded to Madras, Visakhapatnam, Calcutta, and Mayapur for the first International Gorpanim Festival. A month later, Brahmananda showed up in Mayapur. What are you doing here? Prabhupada asked. You invited everyone for the festival, Brahmananda replied, for chanting and dancing and prasad. Oh, the festival is not important for you, Prabhupada said. Your business is in Bombay. But all the devotees are here, Lord Chaitanya. No festival for you, Prabhupada. You must immediately go to Bombay and take Nair with you. He is a builder. Go immediately. Yes, Prabhupada. We'll go. Go now. And so Brahmananda and Nair left for Juhu. Those were the days. Their first task was to clear the property, pull up the brush, clear out the snakes and rodents, clean the area, and level the land. It was, Brahmananda said, a huge back-breaking job. For digging deeper and doing heavy work, Narayan went early one morning to the labor market in nearby Ville Parle will clear the land, the laborers there told him. But you have to supply the Pura and Gamela. Narayan didn't know what a Paura and Gamela was. When he came back and told a local friend, the friend said, "That's reasonable." And eventually Narayan found out that a Paura was a hoe-like tool for chopping the dirt, and that the Gamela was a walk-like metal bowl that the workers balanced on their heads to carry the dirt. So he went to Bhuleshwar and returned by train loaded with puras and gamelas. And the next day, he returned to Vileparle and hired the men who seemed happy with his purchases. Men with machetes were hired to cut down the jungle. To encourage them and speed progress, Brahmananda joined them in the work, along with Mr. Seti and other devotees. Although Mr. Seti was a contractor with many laborers under him, he came and worked personally, seeing the endeavor as devotional service. And with everyone working together, all the brush, jungle, garbage, everything was soon gone. The workers and the devotees clearing the land naturally attracted the attention of the tenants. While one of them, Padmanabha Acharya, was working in his garden, he saw Brahmananda and other devotees cutting bushes, and clearing the front, vacant area of the property. He hadn't heard of anything about the devotees, but they seemed to work hard and without stop from morning till night, and he wondered what they did for food. The first day he was curious, but he didn't say anything. The day after that, he asked one of the devotees, "What's going on here? And what about your food?" "We don't take food unless it's first offered to Krishna," the devotee replied. "We take early in the morning, and then when we go back in the evening." Mr. Acharya offered them tea, but they said they didn't drink tea. Then one day he had 3 or 4 of them at his home and gave them milk. And that was the beginning of his relationship with the devotees. The next day, more devotees came, and being from Karnataka in South India, he gave them upma, a soft, savory suji preparation. It went on like that for a few days. Then he noticed one devotee eating the chilies cooked in the food for flavor, but not actually meant to be eaten. When he asked about it, the devotee explained, "It's prasad. We can't leave anything." After about 10 days, Prabhupada arrived in Bombay. He had told the devotees that he wanted them to occupy the land immediately. This was crucial, he said, since under Indian statutes, possession really was 9/10 of the law. If you lived on the land, you practically owned it. This was a bit of a conundrum, however, since you couldn't construct any buildings until you owned the land. According to the agreement with Mr. Nair, with the money the devotees had paid to date, they could live on the land, but they could not begin any construction. What to do? Brahmananda asked Prabhupada, "How do we live in a place where there's no building?" I know the answer. We did it in Hyderabad. "You make a pandal," Prabhupada told him. "You can always make a pandal. It's not construction, so you don't need a permit. But make a permanent pandal." The devotees had never heard of a permanent pandal, but Brahmananda had the idea to make an elaborate one with many rooms of corrugated tin, roofing sheets, tin sheds, or hutments, which we came to call simply huts. "We'll live in these," Prabhupada said. Meanwhile, the devotees told Prabhupada about Mr. Acharya, who turned out to be a follower of Krishna, and Prabhupada decided to pay him a surprise visit. When Prabhupada arrived at Mr. Acharya's apartment, and Mr. Acharya invited him in, Prabhupada saw a photograph of Sri Padmadvacharya and bowed in respect. "Mr. Acharya," he said, "you're a Madhva." "Yes." Mr. Acharya replied. I was born in the place where Madhva Acharya was born, Udupi. Oh, you are fortunate, Prabhupada remarked. Then, seeming out of nowhere, he asked, can I stay with you? Mr. Acharya was taken aback, but also pleased. Swamiji, he replied, it will be a great blessing. Whatever I have, you can share with me. Mr. Acharya had been impressed with Prabhupada's disciples, and he was filled with wonder that Prabhupada had been able to turn people born as Christians into devotees of Krishna. He felt proud that an Indian could do what Prabhupada had done. Prabhupada soon came back to stay. Quote, he always had a triangle of devotees standing beside him, Narayana later remembered, because everyone wanted to see what he was doing and hear him in case he said something. So, Srila Prabhupada came swooping up to the Acharya's house with some disciples, and all the Acharyas were standing on the open front porch on either side of the way Prabhupada would enter. It looked grand. They were standing there as though they were giant Vijay, the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha. Prabhupada swooped up and stood on the porch, then turned elegantly and said, finally I'm taking shelter of the Acharyas. Brahmananda and Narayana undertook to put up the pandal. Brahmananda went down to Bhuleshwar in Old Bombay to the office of a contractor, Mr. Bhuttere, Mr. Bhuttere, a Parsi who was very accommodating. Oh, yes, sure, he said. Anything you want, we'll do. When Brahmananda asked about the cost, Mr. Bhuttere just said, don't worry about it. So Brahmananda had him build the pandal with 10 sheets, with a stage and a kitchen and separate quarters for the men and women. There was no flooring, only dirt, which was fine for the dry weather then. Paragraph. Whenever Brahmananda asked Mr. Bhuttere about the cost, the contractor said, don't worry about it. Brahmananda's experience in Kenya was with pious Gujaratis. They never had to pay anything. They controlled the retail trade and given him everything for free. Gas, clothing, electronics, food, flowers, anything. So Mr. Bhuttere said, don't worry about it. Brahmananda thought the work might be done for free, or at most for a nominal sum. But when the work was complete, he later recalled, I was shocked when he presented a bill of an extraordinary amount, which we couldn't pay. He demanded the money and threatened to remove everything if I didn't pay. In a panic, I informed Srila Prabhupada, who said I had been tricked, cheated, and didn't know how to manage. He told me, go right back to Nairobi. This coincided with devotees in Nairobi needing my help, so I left, according to Prabhupada's order. Thereafter, Mr. Bhuttere had to deal directly with Prabhupada. When he came for payment, asking for Brahmananda, Brahmananda was gone. Mr. Bhuttere claimed he had agreements with him for the amount billed, but Prabhupada said Brahmananda has left the country, so we will have to review those bills. Then, after finding out the fare cost from Mr. Sethi, he told Bhuttere, this is what I will pay you, not more. And Bhuttere had no choice but to accept. Later, Prabhupada commented, Brahmananda made a contract with a man for that camp, 40,000 rupees. I settled up for 10,000 rupees. So our work is going on in India and money's spent. 50% is spoiled by this American brain. What can be done? The Indians, they will loot. They cheat like anything, just like this camp. Brahmananda and Mother Devisa to combine together made a contract, 40,000 rupees. Then I said, I'm not going to pay you. You go. Break. One day, during the last week of March, the doorbell at Akashganga rang. And when Madhuri Dasi, the only devotee present, opened the door, she found a young Westerner with long hair. Are there Radha Krishna deities here? He inquired. Madhuri invited him in. Please sit down, he said. The deities are here. You can sit here with them. The other devotees will be back soon. The large white marble deities ordered from Jaipur and paid for by a donation from R.D. Birla, who had first been worshipped at Chowpatty Beach on the last night of the 1971 Bombay Pandal at Cross Maidan. Yes, pronounced. 1 hour passed, and then another, and the young man just sat there with Madhuri while Madhuri attended to her service. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Narayan burst in, followed by other devotees exclaiming, Haribol, Haribol! Shamasundar approached the young man and said, It's great that you came today. This is our last day at Akashganga. We're going to Juhu tomorrow. We have some land, and it has a well, and it's near the beach. There's a pandal there, and Prabhupada will be speaking. Would you like to come with us? We're all going by taxi. Well, I have nowhere else to sleep tonight, the man said. His name was Hans. And he was a Dutch architect who had been wandering around Bombay for over a week looking for a Radha Krishna temple. He had seen devotees in Amsterdam and had come to India to see if their worship had its roots in India or was just a movement in the West. The next day, Hans accompanied the devotees as they piled into 3 taxis and rode to Juhu. 3 devotees sat in the back seat of each taxi, and one with the marble deity of Rasa Vihari laying across their laps, and in one of the others with the deity of Srimati Radharani. Hans was surprised when, on their arrival, Shamasundar asked if he would pay for all 3 taxis. But he did. The pandal was decorated with flowers and featured a large stage with a Vyasa-san for Srila Prabhupada. And as the devotees prepared for Prabhupada's talk, Hans just stood around in the back, not knowing how to act or what to do. Then Shamsundar came up to him and said, We forgot our tape recorder. Do you have one? I do, he replied. Can you record Prabhupada's lecture? Yes, sure. Great. Just take the little microphone and stick it on the big microphone and sit next to the Vyasa-san, and then when the tape finishes, turn it around. While Hans was attaching the microphone, Prabhupada walked in and sat on the Vyasa-san. He looked at the long-haired young man and gestured to a devotee as if to say, Who's he? But then, apparently satisfied, he began. Hans recorded the lecture and gave the cassette to Shamasundar, and Dinanath invited him to sleep with the devotees on the roof, where they had set up mosquito nets. At 3:30 the next morning, Hans was awakened by the net being pulled off him. The other devotees had already risen. Get up, Ramananda was shouting. Go to Mangalarti and chant Hare Krishna. At first, Ramananda thought the reclining figure was one of the devotees trying to sleep in. But when he saw that it was Hans, he said, Oh, that's okay, but you can still go and chant. So Hans went to the pandal for the arti and chanted. During japa, Brahmananda again approached Hans. Prabhupada wants to see you, he said, but first you have to shave your head. Here's 1 rupee. Across the street is a barber. He opens at 7. So Hans went to the barber, and the barber shaved his head, leaving a small but long C-cut. A devotee escorted Hans to Mr. Acharya's place, and Shamasundar took him inside the building, repeating, Prabhupada wants to see you. For what? Hans wondered. When Shamasundar brought Hans into Prabhupada's room, Prabhupada looked up at Hans. Oh, now you look very beautiful. Please sit down. Hans sat on the floor, and Prabhupada asked him just one question. What is the use of decorating dead bodies? 7 o'clock in the morning. There is no use, Hans replied. Exactly, Prabhupada said. So Krishna sent you here to design the temple. And you can start right now. Prabhupada asked Shamsundar to bring paper and pencils and then a set of photos. Hans could sense the other devotees in the room reacting, that something extraordinary was happening. And that, he recalled, was the beginning of my involvement with the Bombay project. It was like my life changing in a few moments. I had no idea what was going on. Prabhupada also told Hans, tomorrow we'll have the ceremony, the consecration of the land, and you will take initiation. I was already totally confused about everything, Hans said later. It was really very funny. They were digging this hole, and I was standing there trying to figure out how cartels worked. With a shaved head next to a Japanese man near a big hole in India. And an Indian guru was giving us both initiation. The process, of course, was that you got a new name. So I was there, and Prabhupada put on the beads on my neck, and I was waiting, and he said, your name is Saurabh. Saurabh. I said, Zorro? I was a little shy to ask the name, and when afterwards the devotees inquired, I said, Zorro? This was really something, I thought. Everyone wanted a name with Krishna. And here I was, Zorro. So I went to Shamsundar and said, there's probably some mistake. Why? He asked. I said, I think Prabhupada said Zorro. And he said, no, that can't be. Don't worry, I'll ask him. And when he came back, he said, no, your name is Saurabh. Saurabh. I thought, what does that mean? Someone said it was a famous Muslim poet. So I thought, oh my goodness. Now I'm coming from the Middle East. I could never figure out why he gave me that name. It was just totally confusing. Saurabh had been trained as an artist and a decorator in Amsterdam's Institute for Applied Arts, but his experience had been with alternative contemporary architecture, and as he put it, I had just come off the streets. I was not clear what Prabhupada meant by design a temple, so I got paper and pencils, and he gave me photos, and I said, oh, I can design. Saurabh drew for 2 or 3 days. Every few hours or so, Prabhupada would come out of his room, look over Saurabh's shoulders and say, that's nice, that's nice. Saurabh was working from pictures of Vrindavan's new Govindaji temple, drawing it from different angles and perspectives. It had a sort of Italian-Indian mix of style, which Prabhupada liked, he later said. The European and Indian together made it sort of international looking. So Saurabh was allocated a place to work, and he started making drawings for the temple. Quote, there was something that gave me the energy, he remembered, something that allowed me to do this work that normally I probably wouldn't have been able to do. Paragraph. 2 weeks later, before leaving Bombay for Australia, Prabhupada instructed us to build a residential hut in the middle of the open space between the buildings at the back of the property. He said we should consult Dr. Indira Shringi about how to proceed, and she recommended a building contractor named Mr. Mehta, since an abandoned structure with completed plinth and RCC columns was already there. Mr. Mehta suggested that we build upon it. Although we had not yet applied for permission from the municipality, we had some donated materials, and we felt that we should start construction right away before the onset of the monsoons. Mr. Mehta estimated the work would cost 5,000 rupees, to which we agreed, though it ended up costing much more. The walls were brick up to 3 feet, and then the tie or slit bamboo rods woven together, crisscrossed up in sheets up to the roof, which was also tie, but which we later covered with tarpaulin tarps. On that rough foundation of a building, apparently meant to be another tenement, which was never completed, there were concrete columns reinforced by metal bars sticking out in all directions. Inside the now covered structure, our workers laid concrete floors, added a maroon finish, and polished the finish until it was quite smooth. But the workmanship was shoddy. The floor's cement covering kept crumbling, leaving holes, and the tarps over the roof leaked when it rained. We even couldn't clean the floors. The cement would loosen and break up. Paragraph. To make matters worse, the hut proved to be a haven for rats. Bombay rats were notorious, unlike rats anywhere else. Not only were they huge, the size of cats, 18 to 20 inches long, with big teeth, but they bit into your skin so stealthily that you wouldn't know it. You would keep sleeping, but then wake up and find yourself in a pool of blood. The hut was also infested with flies, cockroaches, and ferocious mosquitoes. We were constantly being bitten, stung, and harassed by all sorts of vermin and insects. Paragraph. Devotees were living in this terrible hut, Narayani Dasi recalled. Our one little part was the kitchen, and the drinking water was kept in a large clay pot. And when you opened the lid, swarms of mosquitoes would fly out. Many of the devotees were completely sick with dysentery and things, and they told me, oh, you'll get it too. And judging from the water, I believed them. The first day I ate prasad in the hut, I noticed rats running across the roof. I wondered if they would fall in my plate. It didn't happen to me, but it happened to Dravida, a devotee from America. One of the rats that was scampering across the hut fell right into his plate. There was no meal at night, just milk and reading Krishna book. But before we drank the milk, we would have to remove the bugs and mosquitoes. Paragraph or break. When Dr. S.K. Podar, a surgeon with a small clinic in nearby Andheri, introduced to us by our supporter in Juhu, Dr. K.H.F. Singhal, visited, he found that devotees were suffering from fever, amoebiasis, diarrhea, and dysentery. Various tropical and subtropical diseases, not surprising given that we're sleeping on the floor, eating little, and living in poor, unhygienic conditions. In fact, we were sick so regularly that at some point we practically stopped taking notice. At one stage, Narayani remembers Giriraj was so sick with fever or something that he was just lying under a table. Somebody suggested, "Why don't you take care of yourself?" But he replied, "It's okay. It doesn't matter." Dr. Podar assisted Dr. Singhal in caring for us and gave us vaccines against cholera and typhoid. He would help in whatever way he could, he said, and appreciated that the devotees, rather than demanding, did not demand anything. While we were living in the hut, another medical doctor from Manderi, Dr. C.P. Patel, heard about us and came to meet us. Dr. Patel was somewhat proud. He had been born in a Vaishnava family and followed the Vaishnava principles of purity, knew Sanskrit, and could recite many verses, and had gone to London to study medicine. Quite a big thing then. And even there, he had never eaten meat, smoked, or drank. So he considered himself to be Vaishnava, although he often spoke like an impersonalist. He he took a liking to us foreign devotees, and when he saw our circumstances, that many of us were sick, some with malaria, he was inspired to take up a collection to help. He went stall to stall through Mulji Jetta Market, an enormous cloth market in Bombay, begging for cotton and cloth to make pillows and mattresses, to obtain blanket sheets and mosquito nets. Because of his pride, it was a big thing for him to beg. He had never begged in his life, but he did it, and he presented each devotee with a set of basic items: a mattress, pillow, sheet, blankets, and mosquito net. When Prabhupada returned to Bombay, Dr. Patel came to meet him, and he soon became Prabhupada's constant companion on his morning walks. Hey! He would usually come to Prabhupada's room at about 6 and either walk with him to Juhu Beach or drive him there. Then they would walk and talk for about an hour. We also received assistance and encouragement from other Bombay residents. One day, an aristocratic gentleman came to the land in a vintage black limousine. He was stately and noble and elderly, just under 80, 3 years older than Prabhupada, and seemed to be from a bygone era. He introduced himself as Bhogilal Har Govindas Patel and presented us a large basket of many varieties of luscious fruits. We had been eating pretty much just boiled rice and dal, and apart from the little fruit we got from the afternoon deity offering, we never had any. But he came every week with a large basket and ended up being one of our closest friends and biggest supporters. Another helpful person was Mr. Patil, a neighbor just across our southern boundary wall, who was kind enough to let the ladies reside in his small place during the rainy season. Even though the conditions in the hut were primitive, every Sunday, the large partitioned room where the deities were housed was packed for arti and program. Dr. Singhal and his wife came every week, and people were quite sympathetic, impressed that we foreigners had come from such a great distance, leaving our opulent country, and were living in such poor conditions and worshiping Radha and Krishna. A page and a half to go. So even though during the week it was quite a struggle, on Sunday, many friends and visitors would come, and we would get encouragement from them too. Mrs. Singhal wrote about this period in her article, Krishna Lila at Hare Krishna Land, which Srila Prabhupada said should be published in Back to Godhead. Quote, after some time, the season changed. The monsoon came and the sky covered with dark clouds. Sometimes dusty winds blew and sometimes it drizzled. So the devotees shifted the deities to their hut because they had no other place. The hut was not in good condition. No pucca flooring, no proper rooms, no light, no proper ventilation. But Lord Krishna and Radharani chose that place for their temple. Devotees, paragraph. Devotees made a small temple inside the hut, and with all their might, they got everything done. Flooring, lighting, arrangements, and some other improvements. Adjacent to the hut was a beautiful garden made by Narayan and his associates. Paragraph. The devotees were performing all the regular activities and services for the Supreme Lord Krishna and Radha. Daily, they got up early for Mangal Arati, and after finishing their other duties, many of them used to go to different parts of Bombay for preaching, distributing books, making life members, and collecting funds. The whole day they used to work hard and take food again only in the evening. Paragraph. There were always special programs on Sundays. They used to play nice transcendental dramas, and the people used to come in great numbers for Sunday Arati. Paragraph. The hut reminded me of Lord Ram and Sita's hut in Dandakaranya. It became a pilgrimage place for all of us. We always went there and offered whatever help and services we could. Monsoons are terrible in Bombay. Sometimes they played havoc, but these foreign devotees never neglected their service toward Lord Krishna and Radha. Sometimes they used to suffer bodily too, but they never grumbled or complained or demanded anything. If we said something, they always used to say, "No, this is our testing period." There were some neighbors, Mr. Achari and Mr. Patil, who helped them, and sometimes giving accommodation to the women devotees, and Mr. and Mrs. Warrior, Warrier, always stood by them to help them, but other surrounding people were uncooperative. Devotees celebrated many festivals inside the hut temple. When Julan Yatra came, Radharani and Lord Krishna wore dresses I stitched for them. Oh, how happy I was to have their darshan in that dress. They were looking very beautiful and nice. Many days passed like this. Srila Prabhupada was aware of the austere conditions we were enduring, and he expressed his appreciation for us in a morning walk with Dr. Patel. These European American boys, they gave up their smoking habit, drinking tea habit, all habits meat eating immediately, he said. But if we ask any Indian, he has to consider for 3 generations. That is because they have been trained from childhood, Dr. Patel suggested. No. They've been trained from childhood in meat eating, drinking tea, drinking wine, smoking and illicit sex, but they gave up immediately. But in hygiene, they also have to learn our way. Prabhupada. They are observing hygienic principles as far as possible. The only thing is that they require a little guidance. This kitchen behind is too small. No, we can make a big kitchen. We have got enough room. I told them, this is so Dr. Patel again, I told them maybe we must have a small room attached to it where these boys can, Prabhupada. They are thinking, I am not this body. They tolerate. Actually, they tolerate because they actually think that I am not this body. Let the mosquito bite my body. Narottam Das Thakur says, Deha Smriti Nahi Yara Sangsara Kupa Kahantara. When a person fully realizes that the material body and world are temporary, he is not concerned with the pains and pleasures of the body. One who is beyond the conception of the body has no obligation for these material things. Just like there are many sadhus, they simply remain naked, even in severe cold. They are practiced. Dr. Patel. They have reached that Avaduta Vesh. Prabhupada. So this is also Avaduta Vesh. Dr. Patel. But that stage you must reach, Prabhupada. Somehow or other, they have gone to some extent. Never mind the mosquitoes, let them bite. I am not this body. You have hypnotized them, Dr. Patel said that. No, actually they are doing. Although we see that from the bodily point of view, they have become weak. They don't care about it. If they have become weak, how are they chanting and dancing Sankirtan? They are not weak at all. Last paragraph. It was true. We were weak in material energy, but strong in spiritual energy. And despite the austerities, We were ecstatic to be with Srila Prabhupada, serving him and his mission, and desire to erect the Juhu temple. At Mana Satita Das, as Mana Satita Das, probably means Mana Sevita Das. Anyway, from Italy later commented, we were living in bad conditions, but inside our hut, we were happy because Prabhupada was there and we were safe from materialistic life. When he was present, he would give lectures 2 times a day, and we would see him all day long. From the brahmachari ashram, I could see him chanting his rounds. We didn't care that we were sleeping on the ground or in a place where rain came in. We were happy, very happy, really very happy. Whenever I remember those days, I weep. Okay, so that's it for this evening. I lost my page.
What's the page number?
56.
Page 56.
She said 56.
Yeah, there's only 678 or so like that pages. 648.